thanks for joining us. What you can't see is that CP is right there and Tanner is behind the camera. So Craig is going to field whatever questions you may have as we get going through this stuff. And we'll keep it really informal. And Tanner is the designated cameraman, so he'll zoom in and out on some stuff that's pertinent as we get there. What we want to do is leadership met on Tuesday and discussed just the whole situation of COVID. And the thing that I started off with all of the leaders was asking them, how do you feel about it? And the struggle that we all had in common was we're a bit confused. That from one news source to another news source, you either wear a mask, you don't wear a mask, things are really bad or things are looking better. And it was a real kind of convoluted mess where none of us really knew what to really feel about it. It was just kind of an odd and almost leading towards an anxiety within everybody of we just didn't know what was next or what we should or shouldn't be doing. So as a church, one of the premises and one of the driving things that I've encouraged us as leaders and as a congregation is I don't want this place, this building, this opportunity to come and worship to be the most restrictive thing that you have throughout your day. So for example, you can go to a number of stores without a mask and without any sort of restrictions, but you have that when you come here. And some of that was for the sake of the people that were a little more vulnerable, and because when you're walking around through Hy-Vee, unless you're like me or Craig, you're probably not singing out loud for people to hear. So you're not spitting, and so there's less particles of things in the air and all of the different things involved. But the hard thing for us was how do we intentionally keep people safe within the congregation, especially on a Sunday morning, and ensure that this is a place that reflects the freedom that people have in Christ. And so it's a harder balance because we have a congregation that's really high in those that are susceptible and really high in those that are actively carrying COVID or maybe asymptomatic but have very low issues from that. And so trying to find a balance between that has been tough. What we've done previously as far as phase one, I'll refresh you. Phase one was we would be in the parking lot, and so you have the open air. Phase two was that we would come inside and practice social distancing and wear masks. So everybody was required to wear a mask. And then we kind of eased up on the mask wearing when it came to whenever people were sitting and not really doing anything. So if you were singing, we asked that you wear a mask, and the reality was I don't have my mask in here with me now. Most of you didn't even wear your mask the right way anyway. And so as you sang with it like with your nose sticking out so you still breathed in the particles, or it was like under your lip or kind of half on, and all of those things are just kind of the oddity that you notice when you look out in the congregation. And so when you sing, we asked that you had a mask on, and then all the other time, unless you were in close proximity, it wasn't necessary. What we've decided to do as we move forward for this next, you could call it 2.5 or 2.2, or it's our journey back to fully opening with no restrictions. What we've decided to do is encourage mask wearing. So we encourage you to wear a mask, but you are not required to wear a mask. So as you come in the building, if you want to wear a mask, please do so. And we even encourage you to wear one, but you don't have to. This is not a have-to sort of place. So what we want to say is, especially for people that are coming in that would be in the higher risk category, and we'll look at some raw statistical data in a minute. If you are in the higher risk category, which is predominantly those that are 60 and above and have any sort of pre-existing conditions, I would highly encourage you to wear a mask, but you don't have to. Many of you that are in that category have already told me, Ken, you don't know how much stuff I've been through in my life already. I think I'll be okay from this. And if it's not, and it is my time, that's okay. Like, those are real conversations I've had. So, first thing is masks are not required. They are encouraged. If you would like to wear one, please do so. And if you are in the more susceptible category, please do so. So we leave that up to your discretion. The second thing is we're still asking that you would practice social distancing. So within the social distancing is we'll still keep some tape up in the pews, and as things progress, we may lax on some of that. But one thing that we do know is while mask wearing helps, the distancing really helps. And you can kind of see some of that aspect from data within rural areas versus areas within the United States that are more densely populated. Whenever people are closer together, there's more susceptibility of actually contaminating things and contracting the virus. So a little more space is good. So we're still looking at social distancing. One of the things that one of the leaders said that was a great idea was, say you come and you find your spot in one of the pews. What you can easily do is take one of the books, one of the hymnals, and set it beside you at whatever risk level that you're willing to accept. So if you want somebody to be a little bit further away, set it down, and so people will know, hey, this is as close as I'd like you to be. And for example, let's say I set the hymnal down 4 feet away and CP comes in. Well, I would take that away because we sit by each other all the time anyway. And so there's no point in social distancing from somebody inside of the building that you're not going to social distance from the rest of your lifetime. So whether that's a family member or a friend that you see regularly, you guys can sit together. Please do that. But if you are in the group that is not a part of a usual group that you're with, give some room and be respectful. One thing that I think we all need to understand is it's not a bad thing to take a step back. So if you're talking to somebody and they're talking a little close to you, it's okay for you to step back, or it's completely fine for you to say, hey, can I have just a few more feet? There is nobody on the planet that's going to take offense to that right now. Asking for a little more bubble room is completely fine. So if you desire that, simply say so. And then the last thing on here that's kind of the big announcement is we will start opening up the nursery as of the 26th of July. So not this weekend, but the following, the nursery will be open, and Miss Jen and Courtney will send out some details on some of that stuff. We will do everything and anything we can to make sure that your children are safe and sanitized and clean. We'll maybe get the holy water out and give them a little something on the way in and out. That's a joke. We're not that style. Water's just water. It's not special for any other reason. But the 26th nursery is going to go back into effect. So if you have kids that would go in the nursery, and we'll maybe even extend some of those ages, we'll look at some stuff and let you know in the next coming week as far as what's helpful for families and for people in the congregation. One of the questions that you may be having, or maybe I should pause, is there any specific questions that popped up that were important? Okay.
Not yet.
Some of the things that you may be wondering is, why did we choose to do this? Well, for one, we don't want this to be the most restricted place. And for two, when you look at people with families that have little kids, the kids are the ones that usually have the hardest problem with social distancing or wearing masks when they're littler. And so they want to see their friends, they want to be around each other. And so let's say, for example, my Zenny, who's 4, almost 5, very, very soon 5, she tells us. For somebody like that, they might not have that social awareness to not go up to somebody that's a bit more susceptible to COVID. And so what we want to do is provide a place for the kids to go so that those that have older kids, they can still sit in the congregation and participate like they would any other day. Here's some data stuff. And what we've tried to do is say, and me personally, what I try to do is understand that every side spins it for whichever way that they think best. So doesn't matter what news platform you watch, doesn't matter what person you listen to. You can listen to one doctor on this side, another doctor on this side. Everybody's got their own kind of way of comment, and this is a comment in any other way, just like theirs, except all I'm doing is looking at the raw numbers that the South Dakota COVID website has put up. And so I'll put some of these up here. They are the most current. I downloaded them like 11:15 today. So if you look here, this is the first one, and what you can see here is this is the number of people that have had COVID, all cases of COVID. And the thing to notice is we have 0 to 19, 20 to 29, 30s, 40s, 50s, on up to the 80s. And what you can see is this curve is really big as far as really heavy front loaded. It's not a very good bell that you would think of, because the majority of people that have COVID are under 50, or really under 60 would be the most. So from 60 on down, you see the majority of people with COVID. What you need to take note of is just look at this for a second and keep that in mind. When we go to the next one, these are the number of people that have actually been hospitalized. So this is have COVID and require hospitalization. So they got sick enough that they really needed help. So I'll just toggle back and forth here a second. You have 868 that are in that 0 to 19 category, and 22 that required hospitalization. And in talking with one of the leaders who works at the Children's Hospital, many of these actually had pre-existing conditions that led towards COVID susceptibility, and it wasn't just average kids that were out that didn't have any issues. So the back and forth thing here. So you see the high numbers in the 20s and the 30s, and then you see that they creep up little by little, but the younger you are, the less likely you are to need hospitalization. And you can see some of the percentages, 2.5, 3.5, 5, 8. But as you get up here, once you get to 50, then you see 12%. When you get to 60, even though these numbers look very similar, you have to go back and forth between the graph of the number of people that actually had it. And you see 20% once you get to 60 years old and up. When you get to 70 and 80, the numbers are lower, but the percentage is higher. So you see that that's as high as in the mid-30s, almost 40%. And that's just hospitalizations. Now what I want to do is click to the next one, and you can see non-hospitalized. These are the number of people within South Dakota specifically that did not require hospitalization, that did not need any sort of specific medical intervention where they had to go and be hospitalized. They got sick, or they were asymptomatic, or they quarantined from home, but these are people that tested positive and did not need hospital stay. And so you can see the numbers here, that these are quite large for the younger ages. And I'll back up here. So you have 22 in that 0 to 19 that needed hospitalization, and you have 846 that remained that did not. So just think along the lines of 3% need hospitalization. That means 97% of kids did not, 19 and under. That means the same for 30 and under. Like, the sheer numbers are in the 90th percentile of people that did not need to go to the hospital. Now let's say for chance that you do require hospitalization, or you're in this older category that's a little more susceptible. So these are the non-hospitalized again. You can still see there's plenty within that group that are in the older age that did not require hospitalization. Now if you do need hospitalization, you can see here the orange, this is the percentage of hospital beds utilized right now for COVID patients. 3%. Only 3%. And you can see the blue is the non-COVID. So there's 50% of the beds are used by non-COVID. And then you see that there's 48% capacity still left. There's just a whole bunch that's still left. And the data already shows that the vast majority of people that get COVID don't need hospitalization. So that means we have plenty to go around at this point. The whole point of reducing the curve was not that nobody will get it. The majority of us will get it. Majority of us will get sick to some degree, or be asymptomatic, or some of the research I just heard this morning was some of us have specific T cell antibodies from getting the regular cold, the regular coronavirus, and not the COVID coronavirus, that helps us in our immunities. And what happens, the hard part in that is the younger you are, the more T cells you have. So from like 0 to 25, you're building T cells, and from 25 to like 60 something, it's a little slower. And by your 60s, you don't produce very many T cells at all. And so what you have is what you have. That's why we see the immune response being a struggle. And let me just say, I am not a doctor in any way. This is what I'm reading, and this is interpretation of just sheer numbers. So here is the actual deaths. So I'm going to jump all the way back to the very first one. This is how many people have had COVID. You can see 868, 1,600, almost 1,600, two 1,200s, a 700, and then both of those in the 70 to 80s are in the upper to mid 200s. So then I'll jump forward. This is the fatalities that have happened. These are the people that have actually died from COVID. You can see that it starts with 20 to 29 because the kids 0 to 19, nobody's died yet. And I even saw this morning one of the things that, here's an example of spin. Children fatality rate soars as it reaches 11 in certain areas. And then what they showed was children that clearly had some pre-existing conditions. And so the majority of you, this is one of the big factors when we said we would reopen the nursery, is the majority of the kids are 19 and under, obviously, unless there's some older people helping, or you're very childish. You're probably gonna get COVID because of proximity and sucking on things. You're very unlikely to need hospitalization. There's a 97% chance you won't need to go to the hospital. And then there is so far a 0% chance that you will die. Now, all of this stuff is numbers that could change. And that doesn't mean that there aren't outlying things that happen and people with conditions that they didn't know about that could increase those numbers. But as we have it now, 0 have died from 19 and under. 1 in their 20s, 6 in their 30s, 7 in their 40s. And you can see the number kind of goes up. For those of you in your 70s, you're doing better than the 60s and the 80s. Good work. I think that's mainly because they say that in your 60s, once you make it past a certain level in your 60s, and you probably have a little more healthy outlook on life, and physically you're doing better. But when you get into the 80s, then the number does go up. And now keep in mind that this graph is based on 50. So the bars go really high in comparison to the numbers that we had earlier. But 49 out of the 240 some. So as we get a little further in here, you can see this is their basic data that gives you the full thing of the number of deaths, hospitalizations, total people negative, the number of people recovered, and then currently hospitalized. So active cases is 842, and only of those 61 are being hospitalized. That's not very many. And when you look at, here's the mortality or the fatality rate is 1.5 is what the state of South Dakota has specifically. 1.5. That means 98.5% you're not going to die. You're actually more likely to die in a car accident, I think was some of the numbers I saw. And the United States as a whole, even with its huge hot spots and its big surges in Florida and California and Texas and all these places, 4%. So there's still only a 4% chance that you will die. And that even is the same number that's just a little bit higher globally. I think it's like 4.2 or 4.3% chance. When you look at it closer, just within our local area, you see that those that are, here's all the numbers of 59 and under, 0.4% chance. 0.4% chance. The thing I told the leaders the other night was, if I could go to Grand Falls Casino, and if perchance I was a gambling man, and I had a 0.4% chance of not losing, if I had a 99% chance of winning, I'd be hitting that and doubling down all night long. Like, that is really, really, really good. I think the numbers are even higher. Like, for example, cancer has a 1 in 5 1 out of 5 people will get some form of cancer and die from that. Like, just the data goes that we shouldn't be that scared of that. Now, this stuff could change. Things could mutate and all that. I'm just saying, as of today, when you get into the 60 and over category, you begin to see 7%. So your risk of contracting COVID and actually dying from that is 7%. So that's not huge, but it is considerably larger. If you just factor in the difference between 0.4% and 7%, that is a huge gap. But it's not really high as a total. So here's, for example, here's one that just shows, this is from the Johns Hopkins University. They have a really, really good website with lots of info. This says that it was updated today, but I don't think they have today's current numbers in it. And so this was as of yesterday. Fatality rate was 1.45, which I rounded up to 5. They only had 111 deaths. Our county, just the county of Minnehaha, is 1.5. And I didn't pull up all the other data of in the area where, actually, maybe I'll do that. I have this one. So if we look here, so here's Sioux Falls, and you can see 60 deaths, but when you come down into Lincoln County, you have 1. Okay, well, let's go into Northwest Iowa. 0, 0, 5, 1, 0, 0. Okay, let's go to Worthington. That one, they had the big outbreak. 6, 0, 5, 0, 1. And so even when you take into account the areas around us, let me go back to this. We're not doing so bad. So I'm going to go back here again. Here's where we're at. Basic recap. Masks are not required, but we do encourage you to wear them. And maintain social distancing. Still keep some space. Make sure that you're still hand sanitizing and washing and all of those things. And the nursery will open on the 26th. Was there any questions? CP's looking. No. Diet do break. Okay, after 20 minutes, you have the info here. Here's what I want to leave you with. Paul writes to the Thessalonian church. This is one of the earlier letters that Paul writes. And after he has to go through this whole discourse towards the end of 1 Thessalonians about what happens when we die and will we rise with the Lord and what about the resurrection and some of the struggles that they have and just the ups and downs of this life in general and the facing possibility of persecution, he ends the letter this way. Be joyful always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Here's what I'll tell you. The COVID stuff scares us. It scares everybody to some degree. And what do we do moving forward? What's going to happen with schools and government and the world and economies and all that stuff? And the only place that you can turn to find real concrete answers of hope is right here. Because if you flip to the back, you get to the section where it says, and there will be a river of life, and a city that comes, the heavenly Jerusalem, and there will be a tree that has leaves for the healing of the nations. What we know is whether we live or whether we die, we die to Christ. We live to Christ. And that we can't be people that live in constant fear. Now, you may still see some of the numbers and go, I don't know, I still don't feel good about that. That's fine. What I want you to do is be joyful. Pray. Ask God for help. Look to Him. Look to the Scriptures. And remember that through it all, throughout history, this is the thing that centers us. Anything from anybody else?
No. Well, Tanner wanted That's as theological and as health.
Next potluck to be determined. What I will do, so church, here's the thing. I will send out the majority of this info that you can look at on your own, some websites and stuff this afternoon. But remember, this Sunday, masks are encouraged, but not required. Please practice social distancing, and the nursery will be open next Sunday on the 26th. Be safe, be responsible. I like to tell you that some people are smarter than others. Be the smarter ones. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you next time.
Oh, and Dave says we need corn and everything at the potluck.
No corn allowed.